The automated voice from the power company was still echoing in Sophie Chen's ear as she stood in the pharmacy line. Phone pressed against her shoulder. Your account is past due. Service will be disconnected in 48 hours, unless... She ended the call before the recording could finish listing payment options she couldn't afford. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour pharmacy buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving at 2 a.m. Sophie shifted her weight, her feet aching in the worn sneakers she'd resoled twice because new ones weren't in the budget. Next, the pharmacist called, his voice flat with exhaustion that matched her own. Sophie approached the counter and slid the prescription across. For Emma Chen, the albuterol inhaler. The pharmacist scanned it, typed something into his computer, and frowned. Insurance declined. That'll be $218. The number hit like a physical blow. Sophie's checking account had exactly $73, until her next shift at the diner, and that was still 5 days away. Her weekend job cleaning offices paid under the table, cash she'd already mentally allocated to next week's groceries. There must be a mistake, Sophie said, keeping her voice steady. The insurance covered it last month. System says your coverage lapsed on the 15th. The pharmacist's expression softened slightly. You'll need to contact them directly. Sophie knew exactly why it had lapsed. She'd missed the premium payment choosing between insurance and rent. She'd chosen keeping a roof over her and Emma's heads, gambling that her 7-year-old daughter's asthma would hold steady for a few weeks until she could catch up. She'd gambled wrong. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Can I get a partial? Sophie asked quietly. Just enough for a few days? I'm sorry. We can't split prescriptions. The pharmacist glanced at the growing line behind her. Do you want me to hold it while you figure something out? What she wanted was to scream, to cry, to demand why everything had to be so impossibly hard. Instead, she nodded. Please, I'll be back. The October night air bit through her thin jacket as she walked to her car, a 15-year-old sedan held together by hope and duct tape. Emma was asleep in the back seat, bundled in the blanket from their apartment couch. Mrs. Park, their neighbor who watched Emma during Sophie's night shifts, had an emergency with her own grandchildren. Sophie had no choice but to bring her daughter along on the pharmacy run. Sophie slid into the driver's seat and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. $218. She could ask her manager at the diner for an advance, but she'd already done that twice this year. She could try selling something, but she'd already pawned her grandmother's necklace last month to fix the car's transmission. Her phone buzzed. A text from her ex-husband, Daniel. Can't do child support this month. Lost my job. Sorry. Sophie closed her eyes. No surprise there. Daniel's child support was supposed to be $400 monthly. In the 3 years since their divorce, he'd paid it maybe half the time. She'd stopped counting on it, stopped dragging him back to court because the legal fees cost more than she'd ever recover. Mommy? Emma's sleepy voice came from the back seat. Are we home? Almost, baby. Sophie turned to smile at her daughter, whose dark curls were plastered to her forehead with sleep sweat. Just one more stop. She started the car, its engine coughing before catching. The dashboard clock read 2:17 in the morning. Her shift at the diner started at 6, 3 hours of sleep if she was lucky. Sophie pulled out of the pharmacy parking lot, her mind calculating impossibilities. Maybe she could pick up extra hours. Maybe the insurance company would fix their mistake. Maybe Daniel would actually help for once. Maybe. The streets of Chicago's South Loop were nearly empty at this hour, just scattered taxis and the occasional police cruiser. Sophie drove automatically, exhaustion blurring the familiar route home. She was stopped at a red light, 3 blocks from their apartment, when the headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. Too fast, too bright, too close. The black SUV ran the red light at the intersection ahead, tires squealing as it swerved around the corner. Another SUV followed, this one darker, both vehicles moving like they were in a chase scene from a movie. Sophie's exhausted brain struggled to process what she was seeing. Then she saw the child. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, stood frozen in the crosswalk directly in the path of the speeding vehicles. He wore pajamas with dinosaurs on them, his small face locked in terror, caught in the headlights like a deer. Sophie didn't think. Her body moved on instinct. She threw open her door and ran. The world narrowed to tunnel vision. The boy, the headlights, the distance she had to cross. Her feet pounded the asphalt. The SUV's engine roared, growing louder, closer. Sophie reached the child and wrapped both arms around him, using her momentum to throw them both forward. They hit the pavement on the far side of the street, Sophie twisting at the last second to take the impact. Pain exploded through her shoulder and hip as they rolled. The SUV's tires screeched. The smell of burning rubber filled the air. Sophie curled around the boy, making herself a shield, waiting for the impact that would shatter them both. It didn't come. The SUV veered at the last possible second, missing them by inches. Sophie felt the heat of the engine, the rush of displaced air. Then it was past, speeding down the street with the second vehicle in pursuit. Their taillights disappeared into the night, leaving only the echo of engines and the smell of burnt rubber. Sophie's ears rang. Her vision swam. She was dimly aware of car doors slamming, running footsteps, voices shouting in Italian. "Nico! Nico! Where are you?" The boy in her arms was crying, his small body trembling. Sophie forced herself to move, to check him for injuries despite the screaming pain in her shoulder. "You're okay," she gasped. "You're okay, sweetheart. I've got you." Strong hands grabbed her arms and yanked her away from the child. Sophie cried out as her injured shoulder protested. She found herself staring up at a man in a black suit, his face hard and suspicious. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What are you doing with him?" "I saved him." Sophie's voice came out hoarse. "He was in the street. The cars." "Marco." Another voice cut through, sharp with authority. "Let her go." The hands released her immediately. Sophie slumped against the pavement, her body shaking with adrenaline crash. Through blurring vision, she watched a man kneel beside the crying boy, gathering him into his arms with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his appearance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Sophie's monthly rent. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that held something dangerous and desperate in equal measure. He murmured to the child in Italian, checking him for injuries with hands that shook slightly. "Papa," the boy sobbed, clinging to the man's neck. "The cars came and I was scared and shh. Nico, I have you." The man's voice cracked on the words. "You're safe now. I have you." His eyes found Sophie's across the distance. For one long moment, their gazes locked. She saw him register her worn clothing, her obvious exhaustion, the way she cradled her injured arm. Saw him process what she'd done, throwing herself between his child and death without hesitation. "You saved him," he said. It wasn't a question. Sophie tried to stand and immediately regretted it. The world tilted sideways. Her shoulder felt wrong, something grinding that shouldn't grind. "He was in the street," she said stupidly. Like that explained everything. I had to. "Boss, we need to move." The man who'd grabbed her, Marco, spoke urgently. "Those were Constantine's men. They'll circle back." The man holding Nico stood in one fluid movement, his son still clutched against his chest. He looked at Sophie, then at Marco. "Bring her." "What?" "No." Sophie tried to back away and nearly fell. "I'm fine. I need to get home. My daughter's in my car." "Your daughter?" The man's eyes widened fractionally. He barked orders in Italian. Two more men in suits appeared from nowhere and jogged toward Sophie's sedan at the corner. "Wait! Don't!" Sophie tried to run after them, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She managed 3 steps before her knees buckled. The man caught her before she hit the ground, shifting Nico to one arm and supporting her with the other. "Easy," he said, his accent more pronounced now. "You're hurt." "Emma," Sophie gasped. "My daughter. She's 7. She's asleep in the back seat. Please don't. No one will hurt her." His voice was firm, absolute. "Marco, personally bring the child, and call Dr. Ricci. Tell him we're coming in. Boss. Now, Marco." Sophie watched through a haze of pain and confusion as one of the suited men carefully opened her car's back door and lifted Emma out, blanket and all. Her daughter stirred but didn't wake, her small face peaceful in sleep. "What are you doing?" Sophie tried to focus, but the edges of her vision were going dark. "Where are you taking us?" "Somewhere safe," the man said. "You saved my son's life. That means you're in danger now. Constantine saw you. He knows you interfered." "I don't understand. Who's Constantine? Why would I be in danger? Sophie's words slurred together. "I just need to go home." "You can't." He shifted his grip, supporting more of her weight as her legs gave out completely. Not anymore. Not after this. The last thing Sophie saw before consciousness left her was Nico's small face peering down at her from his father's arms, tear-stained and afraid. The last thing she heard was the man's voice, quiet and firm. "I've got you. Both of you. I promise." Then darkness folded over everything like a blanket. And Sophie Chen's normal life, her struggles and her exhaustion, and her impossible calculations slipped away into the Chicago night. Sophie woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the smell of coffee so rich it made her stomach growl. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was dreaming. Her apartment didn't have windows like this. Her apartment barely had windows at all. Just one small frame that looked out onto the alley behind the building. She tried to sit up and pain lanced through her shoulder, bringing reality crashing back. The street, the child, the cars, the man with dangerous eyes who'd caught her. When she fell, "Easy," a calm voice spoke from beside the bed. "You dislocated your shoulder and bruised 3 ribs. Doctor." Ricci relocated the shoulder. "But you'll be sore for several days." Sophie turned her head to find an elderly man in a white coat sitting in a chair near the bed. He had kind eyes and an old-world formality in his posture. "Where am I?" Sophie's voice came out as a croak. "Where's Emma?" "Your daughter is safe. She's having breakfast with Nico." The doctor stood and poured water from a crystal pitcher into a glass that probably cost more than Sophie's weekly grocery budget. "My name is Dr. Ricci. You're at the Andredy estate. And before you panic, let me assure you that you and your daughter are under protection, not detention." Andredy. The name tickled something in Sophie's memory. Some news story she'd half heard while wiping down tables at the diner. Something about organized crime and federal investigations that never quite stuck. "I need to see her," Sophie said, trying to sit up again despite the pain. "I need to see Emma right now. And you will. But first I need to check your vitals." "Doctor." Ricci approached with a stethoscope, his movements slow and non-threatening. "May I?" Sophie wanted to refuse, wanted to demand they let her see her daughter immediately. But something in the doctor's steady professionalism reminded her of the good nurses at the hospital where she'd taken Emma for asthma attacks. People who understood that staying calm was the best medicine for fear. She nodded and submitted to the examination. Dr. Ricci checked her pupils, her breathing, her pulse. He gently palpated her relocated shoulder and felt along her ribs. "You're lucky," he said finally. The shoulder damage was clean. No torn ligaments. The ribs will hurt for a week or 2, but they'll heal on their own. He paused, studying her face. "When did you last eat?" The question caught Sophie off guard. Yesterday afternoon, before my shift." "Which was?" 6 to midnight, at the diner." Sophie's cheeks heated. She wasn't used to anyone noticing the gaps in her life, the meals she skipped to make sure Emma ate enough. "Doctor." Ricci's expression softened. "I'll make sure the kitchen sends up a proper breakfast. You can't heal without fuel, Miss Chen." "How do you know my name?" "Your driver's license. Also, Mr. Andredy is very thorough in his research." The doctor packed his instruments into a leather bag. "He'll want to speak with you soon. I suggest you hear him out before making any decisions." "What kind of decisions?" "But doctor." Ricci was already heading for the door. "I'll send Carmela up with your daughter. And Miss Chen?" He turned back, his expression serious. "What you did last night, throwing yourself between a stranger's child and those vehicles, that was either very brave or very foolish." "I'm a mother," Sophie said quietly. "I didn't think about it. I just moved." "Precisely," Dr. Ricci said. "That's what worries Mr. Andredy. People who act without calculating the cost are rare in his world, rare and dangerous to themselves." He left, and Sophie was alone with her churning thoughts. She carefully swung her legs out of the bed, testing her body's limits. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken beyond the shoulder and ribs. She was wearing a silk nightgown she definitely hadn't put on herself, and her cheeks burned imagining strangers undressing her while she was unconscious. The room was stunning in a way that made Sophie's entire apartment feel like a closet. Hardwood floors, cream-colored walls, furniture that belonged in magazines. The windows overlooked manicured gardens that seemed to stretch forever, bounded by a high stone wall. A prison with a pretty view. Sophie was testing whether she could stand when the door opened. A woman in her 50s entered, motherly and efficient, followed by Emma. "Mommy." Emma ran to the bed and Sophie caught her daughter in a one-armed hug, biting back a gasp of pain. "Baby, I'm okay." "I'm okay." Sophie buried her face in Emma's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her cheap strawberry shampoo. "Are you okay? Did anyone scare you?" "No, everyone's really nice." Emma pulled back, her dark eyes wide with excitement. "Mommy, this house is huge. And Nico showed me his toy room. He has like 1,000 cars. And we had pancakes with real maple syrup, not the fake kind. And breathe, sweetheart." Sophie managed a laugh despite everything. "I'm glad you're okay." "I'm Carmela," the woman said warmly. "The housekeeper. I've brought you clothes and breakfast." The little one insisted on bringing it herself. Emma proudly gestured to a rolling cart laden with more food than Sophie and Emma ate in a week. Eggs, bacon, toast, fresh fruit, pastries that looked professionally made. "This is too much," Sophie protested. "Mr. Andredy's orders." Carmela began setting plates on the small table by the window. "He says you saved his son's life. In this house, that means you want for nothing." Want for nothing. The words felt absurd. Sophie had spent 7 years wanting for everything: time, money, energy, hope. "Can we eat, Mommy? I'm still hungry." Emma was already eyeing the pastries. Sophie couldn't remember the last time Emma had said she was still hungry. Usually, their meals were carefully portioned, stretched to last. "Of course, baby." They ate together, Emma chattering about Nico and the house and the garden she could see from the breakfast room. Sophie listened with half her attention. The other half focused on planning their escape. Because this was clearly a gilded cage. No matter how kind Carmela seemed or how good the pancakes tasted, she needed to get Emma home, get back to their apartment, their lives, their normal struggle, this place, this wealth, this danger that apparently came with saving a child. None of it was meant for them. "Miss Chen?" A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Mr. Andredy would like to speak with you." Sophie's stomach tightened. "Now?" "When you're ready. He's in his study." "I want to come too," Emma said. "No, baby. You stay here with Carmela." Sophie kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'll be right back." She stood carefully, testing her injured body. Carmela had provided simple clothing, black pants, a white blouse, both in exactly her size. More evidence of the disturbing thoroughness of Mr. Andredy's research. The guard led her through hallways that seemed designed to intimidate. Oil paintings worth more than Sophie would earn in her lifetime. Marble floors that echoed her footsteps. Finally, they reached a set of double doors. The guard knocked once and opened them without waiting for a response. The study was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and windows overlooking the same gardens. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind it sat the man from last night. He looked different in daylight. Still dangerous, but more human, dark. Hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. His suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with old scars. He stood when Sophie entered, that same old-world formality Dr. Ricci had shown. "Miss Chen, please sit." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Sophie remained standing despite her aching body. "I want to go home." "I know you do." His voice was steady, measured. "But we need to talk first." "About what?" "I saved your son. You had me brought here. Now I'm leaving." Sophie crossed her arms, immediately regretted it as pain shot through her shoulder, and let them drop. "Thank you for the medical care and the breakfast, but Emma and I need to get back to our lives." "Your lives." He said it quietly, almost sadly. "Tell me, Miss Chen, what are you going back to?" The question landed like a slap. "Excuse me? I had you investigated last night." He didn't apologize, didn't look away from her mounting anger. "Single. Mother. Divorced 3 years ago. Father of your child pays support sporadically at best. You work double shifts at Mel's Diner on South Michigan Avenue. You clean offices on weekends. Your apartment is 2 months behind on rent. Your electricity is about to be shut off. And last night, you couldn't afford your daughter's asthma medication." Sophie's face burned with humiliation and fury. "You had no right. I had every right." He moved around the desk, each step deliberate. "You saved my son's life. Which means Konstantin Volkov, the man whose vehicles nearly killed Nico, now knows your face. In my world, Miss Chen, witnesses don't live long. Neither do heroes who interfere with assassination attempts." The words felt unreal, like dialogue from a movie. Assassination attempts. "You're saying someone was trying to kill your son?" "I'm saying someone was trying to kill me." Nico was in the car. Collateral damage they were willing to accept. His jaw tightened. My security managed to get him out during the chase. They were supposed to secure him inside a building, but Nico got scared and ran. And I happened to be there. And you threw yourself between my 5-year-old son and a 2-ton vehicle without hesitation. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that Sophie could see the fine lines around his eyes, marks of stress and sleepless nights. Do you understand what that means? It means I'm a decent human being. It means you're a target. His voice was gentle but firm. Constantine's men saw you. They saw you save Nico, and now they'll assume you're connected to me, which makes you a threat to eliminate or a tool to use against me. Sophie's knees felt weak. She sank into the chair she'd refused earlier. That's insane. I'm nobody. I'm just a single mom trying to survive. You were nobody. He returned to his side of the desk, putting distance between them. Now you're the woman who saved Luca Andredi's son. And in my world, that changes everything. Luca Andredy. The name clicked fully into place now. She'd heard it on the news, always connected to words like alleged, organized crime, under investigation. The kind of man Sophie's mother would have warned her to run from. Except Sophie had already run toward him, or at least toward his son. And now she was sitting in his study, injured and exhausted, while her daughter played with his son somewhere in this mansion. What do you want from me? Sophie asked tiredly. I want you to stay here. Luca leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Under my protection, until I can neutralize the threat Constantine poses. For how long? I don't know. His honesty surprised her. Days. Weeks. However long it takes. I can't just disappear from my life. I have jobs, responsibilities. Emma has school. I've already called your employers. Told them you had a family emergency and would be unavailable. At her expression, he continued quickly. Your rent has been paid through the end of the year. The electric company has received payment. And your daughter's medication, all of it. A year's supply is being delivered today. Sophie stared at him. You can't buy your way out of kidnapping me. I'm not kidnapping you, Miss Chen. I'm protecting you. Luca's voice hardened slightly. Whether you like it or not, you're in danger because of what you did last night. I won't apologize for keeping you safe, by imprisoning me in your mansion, by offering you security, medical care, everything you and your daughter need. He paused. Tell me honestly, can you provide those things better on your own? The question hung between them, brutal in its accuracy. Sophie wanted to say yes, wanted to throw his money and his protection back in his face. But she thought of the pharmacy counter, the insurance that wouldn't cover Emma's medication, the electricity about to be shut off. She thought of her daughter saying, I'm still hungry, for the first time in months. This isn't protection, Sophie said quietly. This is control. In my world, they're the same thing. Luca's expression softened fractionally. Miss Chen Sophie. May I call you Sophie? She didn't answer, which he apparently took as permission. Sophie, I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you're scared and angry and this feels wrong. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. But I'm asking you to trust me for just a few days. Let me deal with Constantine. Let me make sure you and Emma are truly safe. Then, if you still want to leave, I won't stop you. You swear? I swear. He held her gaze. On my son's life. I swear it. The vow felt heavy, significant. Sophie studied his face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion that matched her own. This man who'd built walls around himself and his son, who saw threats in every shadow. He was asking her to trust him. She thought of Emma's excitement about the breakfast, about playing with Nico, thought of returning to their apartment where the electricity might already be shut off, where she'd have to figure out how to pay for medication she couldn't afford, thought of being in danger from men she'd never heard of because she'd done the right thing. 3 days, Sophie said finally. I'll stay for 3 days. Then we talk again about leaving. Something like relief crossed Luca's face. 3 days. Thank you. And I want to talk to my daughter's school. Explain why she'll be absent. Of course. I'll have my assistant set it up. Sophie stood carefully, her body protesting. Mr. Andredy. Luca. Please. Luca. The name felt strange in her mouth, too intimate. I saved your son because it was the right thing to do. Not because I wanted anything from you. I know. He stood as well, that ingrained courtesy again. That's exactly what makes you dangerous, Sophie. You do the right thing without calculating the cost. In my world, people like you don't survive. And yet, here I am. Yes. His slight smile held something complicated: admiration, worry, something else she couldn't name. Here you are. Sophie turned toward the door, then paused. Your son. Nico, is he okay? After last night. He's resilient, and having your Emma to play with has helped distract him. Luca's expression warmed when he spoke of his child. He's been asking about you all morning. Wants to thank the brave lady who saved him. Despite everything, Sophie felt her lips curve slightly. He's a sweet boy. He is. Luca's voice dropped, and I will do whatever it takes to keep him safe. Even if that means keeping you here against your wishes. I hope you understand that. Sophie met his eyes across the study. Saw the father behind the crime boss, the grief behind the control, the fear that drove every decision. I understand, she said quietly. But understanding doesn't mean I agree. She left before he could respond, following the guard back through the maze of hallways, back to her daughter and the gilded cage and the 3 days she'd agreed to trade for safety she wasn't sure she believed in. Behind her, Luca Andredy stood alone in his study, staring at the door Sophie had closed, his hands clenched into fists on his desk. He'd made her a promise. 3 days, and then they'd talk about leaving. But even as the words left his mouth, he'd known they were a lie. Because the moment Sophie Chen threw herself between his son and death, she'd stopped being a stranger. She'd become something else, something precious and dangerous and impossible to let go. And Luca Andredy never let go of what was his. The mansion was too quiet at night. Sophie had never known silence like this, thick, watchful, as if the very walls were listening. Even Emma, usually a restless sleeper, had drifted off easily after a day of exploring marble hallways and gardens that looked like something from a fairy tale. Sophie stood by the window of her room, the moonlight painting, pale silver across the polished floor. Somewhere beyond the stone walls, Chicago pulsed cars, sirens, the hum of life. But here, time felt suspended. She wrapped her good arm around herself and tried not to think about how easily her world had been rewritten. Yesterday she'd been counting crumpled bills in a fluorescent pharmacy line. Now she was inside the home of a man newspapers called the Ghost of Chicago. Luca Andredy. Even his name carried weight, as though it belonged in a different century, one where power was taken, not earned. Downstairs, in the study, Luca stared at the same moonlight through a tumbler of untouched whiskey. Marco waited near the door, his usual calm strained. She's awake? Luca asked without looking up. Yes, boss. Hasn't slept since the doctor left. She doesn't trust us. She shouldn't, Marco replied quietly. She's not from our world. Luca's mouth curved not quite a smile. She is now. He set the Bruce, glass down, and rubbed a hand across his eyes. Constantine has gone silent. That means he's planning something. I want eyes on every route leading to the estate. Yes, boss. And Marco. Luca's tone shifted, quieter, edged with something that wasn't command but concern. No one touches her. Or the child. Understood? Marco nodded. Understood. When the door shut behind him, Luca exhaled a long, slow breath that carried exhaustion he could never show. He'd seen many kinds of courage in his life: soldiers, killers, men who'd faced death without flinching. But what Sophie Chen had done went beyond courage. It was instinct. It was purity. And it terrified him. The next morning, Sophie woke to the sound of laughter. Emma and Nico were chasing each other through the garden, Carmela watching from a bench with an indulgent smile. For the first time in months, Emma looked carefree. No wheezing, no dark circles under her eyes, just sunlight and joy. Sophie leaned on the window frame, torn between relief and unease. Whatever this world was, gilded, secretive, dangerous, it had given her daughter something she hadn't seen in years: safety. There was a knock. She turned to see Luca standing in the doorway. Sleeves rolled again, no jacket, just that same impossible calm. You're up early, he said. I didn't sleep much. I'm not surprised. He stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away. I wanted to thank you again properly. You saved my son. That debt doesn't vanish overnight. I didn't do it for a debt, she said sharply. You keep saying that, like I traded his life for this. She gestured around the lavish room. I didn't. I know. Luca's gaze softened. But understand, in my world, saving a life creates a debt, whether you ask for it or not. Sophie's throat tightened. Then maybe I don't want to be part of your world. Luca's expression flickered, something unreadable passing through his eyes. That choice may no longer be yours. That evening, the estate changed. The staff moved with quiet urgency. Men in suits patrolled the grounds. Sophie noticed the subtle shift. More radios, fewer smiles. Something was happening. She found Luca in the study again, speaking into a phone in low Italian. When he ended the call, his expression was carved from stone. "Constantine made his move," he said before she could ask. "One of my warehouses was hit last night. 2 men dead." Sophie felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You think he'll come here?" "I know he will." "Then let me leave." "You said 3 days." "And it's been 2, he said quietly. "You leave now, and you won't make it past the city limits. My men intercepted chatter your name was mentioned. They think you're my mistress." Sophie's breath caught. "That's not— I know it's not." Luca interrupted, his tone low, controlled. "But perception is enough. In this life, what people believe is more dangerous than what's true." She sank onto the nearest chair, her pulse racing. "So what do I do? Just sit here and wait for whoever this man is to come for me?" "No." Luca crossed the room and crouched beside her. For the first time, she saw the faint tremor in his hand, the barely contained tension of a man holding back more emotion than he'd ever admit. "You trust me." Her laugh came out sharp and bitter. "Trust you? You're the reason I'm in this mess. You're alive because of me." He countered, voice rising for the first time. Then he caught himself, exhaled, and looked away. "And because of you, my son is alive. That makes us even, except the world won't see it that way." He stood, putting distance between them again. "There's a safe room downstairs. If anything happens, Marco will take you and the children there. Do not argue. Do not try to run. Promise me that." Sophie wanted to tell him no, that she wouldn't be ordered around like one of his soldiers. But when she met his eyes, the dark, haunted look of a man who'd lost too much already, she couldn't. "I promise." "Good." He nodded once, then hesitated. "And Sophie, whatever you hear about me, whatever you think you know, I need you to remember one thing." "What's that?" The first gunshot shattered the quiet like a lightning strike. Sophie froze for half a heartbeat, then ran. Her bare feet slapped against the marble hallway as Emma's scream echoed again from the next room. She burst through the door. Her daughter stood by the window, eyes wide, clutching the stuffed rabbit Luca's housekeeper had given her. "Mommy, what's happening?" Sophie dropped to her knees, pulling her close. "It's okay, baby. It's okay." But she could already smell the gunpowder, hear the metallic click of rifles outside. Marco appeared at the door, face grim. "We have to move. Now." "What's happening?" Sophie demanded. "Constantine's men found us. East perimeter breached." His hand went to the earpiece at his collar. "Secure route, Bravo. Get the boy." He looked at Sophie again. "Do not leave my sight. Understand?" Before she could answer, a thunderous explosion ripped through the courtyard. The lights flickered, dust raining from the ceiling. Emma started crying. Marco grabbed Sophie's arm. "Go." They ran through the corridor past oil paintings, past the shattered glass of a skylight. Sophie's mind was a blur of motion and fear. She caught glimpses of black-suited men firing from behind pillars, the staccato flash of muzzle fire lighting up marble walls. Somewhere below, Luca's voice barked orders, cold and precise. "Seal the north wing! Move them to sub-level 2! His command echoed through the chaos, the sound of a man holding an empire together by sheer force of will. The safe room was hidden behind a wall of old wine barrels. Marco keyed a code into a steel panel, and the hidden door slid open with a hiss. "Inside!" he shouted. Sophie pushed Emma through first, then turned, but the moment her foot crossed the threshold, another blast thundered behind them. Shrapnel tore through the air. Marco staggered, blood spreading across his sleeve. "Go!" he barked, shoving her the rest of the way in. The door sealed shut just as bullets hammered against the other side. Inside, it was dark, except for the low emergency light glowing red against metal walls. Emma clung to Sophie's waist, trembling. "Is Luca?" Sophie began. But Marco shook his head, breathing hard. "He's still out there. He won't fall easily." Downstairs. Luca Andredy moved like a storm. 2 men followed him through the shattered great hall, where gunfire rattled like drums. He fired twice, each shot precise, efficient. A third man tried to flank from the balcony. Luca didn't even look up. One twist, one pull of the trigger, and the threat was gone. He wasn't the polished businessman now. He was the ghost, the man Constantine once called Il Cacciatore, the hunter. Blood splattered across the white marble lion statue as Luca crouched behind it, reloading. His phone buzzed once. Marco's distress code. "Get to sub-level 2, he ordered into his comm. Now. Then he saw it, a shadow moving across the hallway toward the east wing. Toward the safe room. Sophie heard footsteps approaching, heavy, slow, not Marco's. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Marco raised his gun, wincing at the pain in his arm. The steel door shuddered once, twice, then silence. Emma's whisper broke the stillness. "Mommy?" Sophie pressed a finger to her lips. The next instant, the door exploded inward. The force threw them back. Marco fired, hitting one man before another slammed him to the ground. Sophie grabbed Emma and tried to crawl away, but rough hands yanked her up by the hair. Well, a low voice drawled in, accented English. The woman who saved Andredy's son. She turned and met the cold, gray eyes of Konstantin Volkov. He was taller than she expected, built like the men who broke bones for sport. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You caused me trouble, Devushka," he said, brushing a finger along her cheek as if testing whether she was real. "You make Andredy weak. I cannot allow that." Sophie's voice shook. "Let my daughter go." Konstantin's gaze slid to Emma, cowering behind her. "Beautiful child. Shame she must grow up without a mother." He raised his gun. The shot never came. A deafening crack split the air, and Konstantin jerked back, blood blooming across his shoulder. Luca stood at the doorway, eyes burning like stormlight. Smoke curled from his pistol. "Touch her again," he said in a voice colder than death, "and I'll bury you in the same dirt you came from." Chaos erupted. Marco lunged up from the floor, tackling one of Konstantin's men. Luca fired again, precise as a scalpel. Sophie grabbed Emma and pressed flat against the wall, shielding her daughter's head. Then silence again, the kind that only follows after the last echo of violence dies. Konstantin was gone, dragged by one of his wounded men through the smoke-filled corridor, leaving streaks of blood behind him. Minutes or maybe hours passed before Sophie realized she was still shaking. Luca was kneeling in front of her, checking her for injuries. His hands, once steady and commanding, trembled slightly. "You're okay?" he asked. She nodded numbly. You came for us." His gaze locked on hers. "I told you everything I do for my son." Then, quieter, almost as if the words were pulled from somewhere he didn't want her to see. "Now it seems I'd do it for you too." Sophie didn't know what to say. The world outside was still burning, the air thick with smoke and fear, but in that moment, she felt something she hadn't in years. Safe. Seen. Luca looked away first. "We'll relocate tonight. Konstantin won't stop." "And if he finds us again?" "Then," Luca said, standing, his voice steel again, "he'll learn what it means to touch what's mine." Sophie and Emma were escorted through the estate's underground corridors, their footsteps echoing against the cold stone walls. The safe room Luca had promised was smaller, simpler than the mansion above, but it was fortified. Bulletproof doors, surveillance feeds, and enough supplies to last weeks. Sophie sank onto a bench, Emma curling against her side, her small body trembling from exhaustion. "Mommy," Emma whispered, eyes wide. "Are we really safe now?" Sophie stroked her daughter's hair. "Yes, baby, we are." And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe it. Above them, Luca paced the mansion, coordinating his men, confirming every perimeter, every escape route. He was exhausted but relentless. Every ounce of the power and fear that had once defined him, now directed toward protecting two people who had nothing to do with his world except for the debt Sophie had created with her courage. By nightfall, the immediate threat had passed. Konstantin's men had been scattered, their operation disrupted, and the estate was secure once again. Luca returned to the safe room, his face softer now, but still carrying the weight of a man who had seen too much death to ever be completely unguarded. "You kept your promise," Sophie said, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "You said we'd be safe." "I keep my word," Luca replied simply. "Always." Sophie studied him, really looked at him for the first time, not the headlines, not the rumors, but the man who had been willing to risk everything to save his son and protect her and Emma. There was a vulnerability there, buried beneath the armor of control and fear, a flicker of humanity she hadn't expected. Emma tugged at Sophie's sleeve. "Mommy, can Nico come visit us tomorrow?" Sophie smiled, a genuine curve of relief breaking through the tension she hadn't realized she'd carried. "Yes, baby, he can." Luca's eyes flicked toward Emma. For a moment, his usual intensity softened completely, and he allowed himself a small, private smile. "Tomorrow," he said. "They can play. Safely." That night, as Sophie lay beside Emma on the reinforced mattress, the weight of the past 24 hours pressed against her. She thought of the pharmacy, the bills she couldn't pay, the nights spent stretching pennies to cover groceries and rent, and then she thought of the child in the street, the car hurtling toward him, and the life she had chosen to save. And now, here she was, in a mansion built on blood and power, protected by a man who had once been a stranger, watching her daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in years. It was surreal, unfair, dangerous, but it was also hope. Morning light crept through the small window of the safe room, pale and quiet, bringing with it the faintest sense of normalcy. Sophie knew the world outside would never be simple again. She would never be able to go back to the way life had been, not entirely. But here, in this moment, she had something she hadn't had in a long time. Safety, security, and the possibility of a future where she could breathe without constant fear. She looked at Luca, who stood silently by the doorway, watching over them both. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" His voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of a man unused to gratitude. "For saving us, for keeping your promise, for showing me that some people do the right thing, no matter the cost." He nodded once. "And you did the right thing, Sophie. That's why you're here. That's why they're safe." For the first time, Sophie allowed herself to imagine what life could look like beyond fear and survival. Not perfect, not easy, but alive, real. And maybe, just maybe, in this strange, dangerous world, she could find something more than mere existence. She held Emma close and closed her eyes, listening to the quiet hum of the mansion, the faint sounds of guards patrolling above. Somewhere far off, Chicago moved on. Somewhere far off, Constantine nursed his defeat. And here, in the fortified underground of the Andredy estate, Sophie Chen allowed herself to rest. For the first time in a very long time, she felt free.